before we throw the questions open to the floor, because we didn't have a chance to interrogate each other in any way, and everyone got a free run, I'm going to encourage the panelists maybe to think of a question that they might ask a fellow panelist, something that was provoked in the discussion. But while they're gathering their thoughts in relation to this, and we'll have to pass around the microphones to make this work, I thought I might ambush you a little bit, Alistair, if you don't think I'm too cruel. Because I think that I think it's very apposite to have a survey of 50 years experience and really to look at that experience. And in your essay in the compendium, there is a statement that jumped out to me. And it is from the OECD Observer in 1990. And it says, quality of buildings is not necessarily irrelevant to the quality of the educational process as a whole. Now, that's really important, and that's what this whole celebration is about, and what the examples we've seen prove. But that's 20 years ago, and that statement came after two other observations you make in your essay. It came 20 years after the 1970s, when the primary focus was on speed and cost of construction and minimizing it. And we're now, 20 years after that OECD Observer aspiration towards quality, you say that we are now obsessed with minimizing cost and increasing the efficiency of construction through prefabrication and the speed of construction. Are these two notions not at odds with each other? Quality, which is an aspiration to a lifelong quality of a characteristic of a school environment or an educational environment, and the focus on minimizing the initial construction cost that seems to have been a failure in the 1970s, but seems to be back with us again now. What would your reaction to that be?
Yes, I think one's got to be very careful when one talks about minimizing the construction cost, and in absolute terms, yes, you could say that that would be anti-quality, because people might say, well, we just take out those aspects of the environment that add quality, whether it's the particular finishes of the building or whether it's some attributes of the building. I think it's much more important to talk about the value of what we're producing and cost in terms of getting better value, and how you manage that value. In other words, not wasting the money, but actually putting it to good, effective use. Clearly the pressure is on now to still provide environments which have to be maintained and built, but for as little money as possible. But that needs to be measured against, well, what's the value, the greater value of what we're producing, and how do we measure it? And that is still a really big issue, because we're trying to measure quality. Well, how do we measure quality? It is, in a sense, qualitative rather than quantitative. It's not always so easy to measure. Yet we get indications from the sort of comments that we've seen on these videos that maybe quality is about a feeling that you get in the building, that people are happy, they're comfortable, they are inspired. So some of these issues are not easy to measure, but I think it's very much still an issue of quality. And I think with quality, of a good quality of building, you do still get, or could get, a good quality of education. I think there is a linkage between the two.
Anybody? Yeah.
If you need a justification for the 5% extra costs that may be a more beautiful building costs than an ordinary standardized building, I think it's sufficient to say that education also includes aesthetical and cultural education, and that we know that learning works better also psychologically if you are happy in the environment, and in contrast to having to fight against some conditions you don't really want to be in. So it's easy to find these 5%, and if you want more justification, you were mentioning the construction costs versus the life cycle costs. Buildings are, school buildings also teach how you use your environment. So they are really a very important means of educating people towards a new usage of space, of energy. This also costs more money in the initial costs, but maybe really saves on the life cycle costs. So maybe you have buildings 10% more expensive than if you just buy some containers and build some nice sculpture in front of it, which also sometimes counts as architecture, which I don't believe is architecture. So you can find the justification, but you have to have the power to reach the people who give the money.
I wanted to make a point about the very impressive presentation by Takaharu. While he was presenting, I realized that the point I was going to make about this dialogue and its limitations between architects and educators, in this case, was not at all the case. It was the exact opposite. And the stunning features of this project had a lot to do with his dialogue, or his and her spouse dialogue, with the school principal, who not only had an extraordinary vision about children and how to educate, how to make them grow, but that he was able to communicate and to enter into a professional dialogue with another profession on an equal basis, and on a communicative capacity that is normally lacking. So I would like him to expand, if you can, about how important was for this design your observation of kindergartens and your dialogue with this extraordinary educator, because it seems to me to condense everything we would need to make these dreams about space and buildings being a key educating tool and mean, which is not the case, because this dialogue is not there.
Okay, first of all, I must say that the principal is not normal educator. He's not from educational field. He tried to be the governor of Tokyo City. And he is the chief secretary of the original Tokyo governor, 1980s. And he tried to be the governor. He failed. So he gave up his career. And he started the cake making business. He made $5 or $6 million, and he said, "Okay, I gave up. I fed up with making cakes every day," and he invested all the money to the kindergarten he built. So that is how he became educator. He's an extraordinary person. But my point is, being amateur is very important thing. You know, he said, what's the quality? It's quite simple. If people smiles in the building, that is a quality. And it's quite easy to understand. And when you build a building for children, right, what you need to do is how you can be one of them. And always my students ask me, my architecture students ask me, how can you make such interesting, funny buildings for children, and how can I do that? And I said, okay, if you want to understand the children, make one. You understand? And some students said, okay, I'm designing a prison for. And said, okay, okay, you should break into the jewelry store. You understand? But I think like that, you know. And you know, it's not so difficult thing to think about, you know. Just you need to be one of them, and if when we designed the kindergarten, we became the teacher for a week, and I tried to understand it. That is the most important thing, I think. That's a quality, and and also I must say the building is not expensive at all.
Become the architect for a week.
Maybe it's a good idea.
If you could, this microphone just there, Julie.
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to comment on what I noticed. The thing I really noticed about your talk too was that you really observed the children and you listened deeply to the context and then responded, you know, for what you could see. And I guess when you were asking Christian about it's the nature of the true collaboration, I would say that was true of the two of our team who aren't here, both Richard Leonard and Mary Featherstone, that there was a deep listening that went on and trying to understand the context, and vice versa, us trying to understand this.
Julie, can I inquire there, because you had an additional consultant that most schools don't have, which was an interior designer.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, what did the interior designer bring to the table that an architect couldn't have or didn't?
Well, I think what Mary brings is she certainly has this amazing love and interest in learning, which is number one. So she's a natural learner, educator, I guess. But I think what she brought, it was really that whole inside-out process of designing from the inside out, with learning and learning settings, learning activities being the centre. And I think then the key thing that she brought that I don't think was there, and I've seen in other architectural groups that I've worked with, it's not there as clearly or as strongly, was her capacity to integrate the flow of the spaces so that the nature of the learning activities and the learning interactions and the social interactions will actually flow well from one to another. I've seen people do lots of learning settings, but they sort of plonk them in the space, whereas what this did was an aesthetic and a beauty really about the way that the spaces integrate and flow. So I think that's what she brought, and it was an interior design head versus a building design, if you like, that was really the key. I'm not saying other architects wouldn't do that, but that was certainly the bit that she brought.
Yeah, look, I might only comment in addition to that. I think we could have run the risk of having had a magnificent building, which could have always just been a magnificent building, but without that fine tuning that Mary brought to human flow, which evolved into the development of the kind of furniture that we chose. And the furniture we chose was not off-the-shelf material. It was purpose-built for the most part for our environment, which allowed us to do the sorts of things that we wanted to do. I think the experience I see with lots of projects is furniture is often forgotten and it's brought in at the last moment to populate the environment. That's not what we did. And I think we're richer for it. So.
I think that's an interesting observation, that you say you want more than a beautiful building, that, you know, in a way, a beautiful building is not enough for you. And it prompts me to try and provoke Christian Kuhn a little bit, if I can, or to get him to explain something which you didn't touch on, Christian, in this presentation, but you end your essay in the compendium with a very provocative statement, in my view, which is, for the time being, architects should refrain from the impulse to design the perfect learning environment. Is that not a little bit at odds with what we're celebrating, or why should they refrain from designing the perfect learning environment?
It's about the word perfection. Perfection means that something cannot be changed anymore. It's in the Latin sense, it is perfect. It doesn't make sense to put anything in addition there. If you do something like this to a school as a living organism, you're probably at best serving the moment, but not serving the development. And there are a lot of ideas in architecture that deal with this question. One of the examples that really is most amusing for me is the MIT Building 20. At the MIT, there is one famous experimental building built in the 1940s. It was designed in an afternoon by a grad student. It was a wooden construction, and people loved it because they said you can put your elbow through the wall, you can dig holes, the thing doesn't collapse. And today at the same site there is one building by Frank Gehry, a perfect building, in aesthetically a perfect building, and it never will come up to this beautiful quality of the old building, where all of the Nobel laureates of the MIT, they were all working in there. And they said, this is our space, we designed it. And one of them mentioned this term microenvironments. This is where I took it from. They said it's a good structure and it has beautiful microenvironments. Gehry never came close to the quality of this building.
Thank you, Christian. You've all been very, very patient with us for the afternoon. If you would like to ask any of the panelists a question, our educators or our architects or our researchers, if you'd please put up your hand. We have several microphones which can go around the room. But if you have a question, I would ask, and the lady in red, I would just ask, before you ask your question, if you would give your name, please, and your organization. Thank you.
Yes, hello, my name is Michelle Sabine Barderoma. I'm an independent researcher. I'm a linguist and a computer programmer. And I have a question for Mr. Kuhn. We saw the video, we saw the children with learning disturbances, and I was wondering, did you at any steps of the conceptions, or yes, when you just thought of creating this structure, this school for invalid, mainly for handicapped children, did you ever think to integrate them with valid children? Because there are many studies that show that the integration of valid with invalid children bring both sides to very good results. They learn to emulate, to communicate with each other, which is other, sorry, and it prepares them to confront themselves with the environment and the life that they will be tackling further on. Did you think about it at one of the conception processes? And if not, do you think it will be possible to realize such plans in the future?
So I'm very flattered by being called the designer of the building. I didn't design the building. I would have loved to, but there are other architects. The question is not a question to architecture. Actually, it is a question to the headmaster of the school, who is in the audience. And I talked to her exactly about the same question before the presentation, and she knows about this idea that integration would mean to have all these children spread to normal schools. But she's I will just quote her, and you can talk with her after the event. She said there are so many horrible stories in this school, so many problems in this place. And you saw the Snowzelen room, and you saw all the effort that is put into the children, that she is really not sure if it is possible to give these children the same treatment if you integrate them into normal schools. There is an ongoing discourse in Austria on the question. Austria has signed the United Nations Charter, which would actually mean to get rid of all those special schools. And it is an ongoing discussion because many people who are very deep in the field are not convinced that for at least a certain group of those children with special needs, integration into normal schools would be a good solution. But maybe the educators here have other opinions on this.
Anybody else? Over here, the man in white. And your name, please, and organisation.
Yes, my name is Mark Stokes. I'm from the UK. Until March of this year, I was a police officer, but because of the financial cuts in the UK, which you're probably aware of, I was made redundant along with another 300 of my colleagues. For the last 20 years of my service, I specialised in a concept called designing out crime, a form of crime prevention. I'm a little bit concerned that there's been no mention this afternoon about the safety and security of children in a learning environment. I would have thought that of all structures within the built environment, a school environment is the one where most of us would consider that safety and security were foremost, especially in view of the all too well-known instances of usually some narcissistic lunatic with a firearm that's gone berserk in these environments around the world. Any comments on that, please?
Before I pass to the panel who are more expert than I must apologise that is my error. When I was introducing the compendium, I had intended to say that there were 4 criteria which the international jury applied to the selection of the 60 buildings in the compendium. And they were innovative design, fitness for purpose, sustainability, and safety. And safety would range from bullying to terrorism to earthquake design in earthquake zones of all sorts. And I should have mentioned that. But the jury do say that it was not mandatory that an exemplary quality in each of the 4 categories was reached for a building to be included in the compendium. That if they demonstrated outstanding characteristics for 1 or 2 of these, that they could then be included for that reason. But on the general issue of safety, perhaps Martin, as a headmaster, I think you'd be the most appropriate.
Thank you, Shane. I can only comment on my own environment. I work in a difficult environment, a local government area that is represented on all statistics as an area in which high levels of crime, drug addiction, family disruption and so forth are very evident. But the experience of our school is, I suppose, unusual in terms of its safety. Whilst we're conscious of safety issues, it is not our belief that fences, gates, guards and cameras are the method that we guarantee student safety. What is that works for us is our management system in our school, the personnel concerned. It is also the work we do with students and young people to work through levels of support for them, understanding of their own issues. We have a very strong wellbeing program in our school. We have a terrific level of family support. Having said that, though, we do have issues from time to time with difficult situations with parents, but by no means do we have crisis or critical situations, touch wood, at this stage. We've had the odd bomb threat. We have strategies for dealing with that, but at the moment, I would not want to go down the direction of higher levels of security. We work very closely with local police, very, very closely indeed, but fortunately our school environment is a little bit of an island, I think, of aspiration, safety, security and comfort for young people. It is well regarded by the community. We have very, very, very low levels of vandalism and damage to our environment, and I think it's the way we expect things to be within our community. Doesn't provide the whole community in all public service sectors, but it's the story for our school. Maybe we're lucky.
I'd just like to add, from the internal safety side of the school, a lot of thought was given to the design of where lockers went, for example, and sort of like the freedom. I think it was Takahara who talked about taking off the walls and the freedom that comes and the lack of bullying perhaps in the school that you were talking about. And the similar thing when there's a free movement that the students have and the human-sized groups that are there in terms of the community. The internal safety and security, I think, is incredible at Dandenong. And I guess the challenge then, though, is the external security.
Actually, we had a very long discussion about the safety. Is it okay? Yeah. Safety of that kindergarten, and the safety was a very important issue. And we had a long discussion, and we realized that terrorism of the school always happened behind very high wall. It's true around the world. In Japan, there was a very serious crime. A crazy man came into very famous elementary school, and the guy stabbed many children, and all killed. Many of them were killed, and they couldn't escape because it happened behind very high wall. And the quite similar thing can be told in the crime terrorism happened in universities in the United States. And so when we designed that kindergarten, we tried to build a fence which is about 1.2 meter tall. And when something happens, they can squash the fence down and they can escape. But if somebody wants to come in, they can't climb up the fence. They have to knock down the fence so they can hear what's going on. So I think being a part of society We thought being a part of society is the best way to avoid the terrorism. That was about terrorism, about safety issue, you know. And we had discussion. We have a very big window with a big sheet of glass, and the children might bump into. And but the principal said, "Should be okay. Let's see. If somebody starts bumping into, we put just the stickers on." And we had we have 640 children, and coming into the school, and the building is already 4 years old. No accident happened, and just our site supervisor of the construction bumped into. That was only one incident happened. So I think we underestimating children. You know, these days, you know, many people are trying to do as many as things they can do, so that they can say we did everything we could do. If anything happens, it's not my responsibility. I think that is all boring thing happens. So when we said, okay, when we in the discussion we said, okay, we do whatever we think best for the education. Then we point out our serious danger, you know, critical thing happens, and then we improve it one by one, or we try to find out the danger it might happen in the future. So I think just how we start dealing with safety issue. We don't start from safety. We do the best for the education, and then we make sure nothing happens.
That's fantastic. We're just on time. No, Taka, thank you so much. And before I invite you to join me and join the panel in the exhibition space for a cocktail, I'd like to remind you that the compendium is on sale in the OECD bookshop here today with a 20% discount. And for those who've been watching on the webcast online, it's available through the OECD website. Let's not forget the children. We shouldn't underestimate the children. We're not going to forget the children, because also in the exhibition outside, we're going to see a special video of the Fuji kindergarten made by the children themselves, and it's really something quite special. So please don't miss that when you go out. But not only must we not underestimate the children and not forget the children, we mustn't forget the educators either. And it has been mentioned that a very special educator, headmaster, is in the audience with us today, and that is Ingeborg Schramm, who's the school principal at the wonderful Bertha von Suttner Sonderschule in Austria. Can you please all recognize Ingeborg as a representative, here as a representative of educators everywhere for these 60 buildings. Thank you, Ingeborg. And if I could leave you with one parting thought, it is that we must keep at it. I mean, an agenda has been set here as well as a review, I think, in some of the comments that have come from the table. We are celebrating, but tomorrow morning we have to get up and start all over again. And so I thought that concept, that notion, was best put by a fellow countryman of mine from my hometown, Samuel Beckett, who came here before the war and became a true Parisian. And as he wrote in his last play, he said, "Ever tried, ever failed. Try again, fail again, fail better." With that, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from the panel. Thank you very much for being with us.